As I said earlier, we're going to be in the Psalms for the next 5 or 6 weeks through the end of July. Last Sunday was Trinity Sunday in the church's calendar, where we remember and proclaim the God that we are gifted, this God who's revealed to us as three persons in one. And so today begins a journey through the Psalms where we learn how we can speak to this God who is revealed to us. What are we to say to this God? How are we to address this God? What's in bounds? What's out of bounds? Is there any bounds at all? Last spring, I went to visit a church member at the church I was previously a pastor at. This guy's name was Kevin. And for a couple of years, miraculously, Kevin had lived with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Usually that disease takes you within a few months of being discovered, but for some reason, in this situation, Kevin was living longer than anticipated. So he had a lot of time to be suffering, a lot of time to be in this illness, a lot of time for his family and friends to grieve and process and walk with him day by day, and it took its toll. Well, eventually Kevin reached out to the church, gave me a call, and said, "I'd like you to come over. I'd like to plan my funeral while I'm still alive and able to do so." So I dutifully went over to Kevin's church with my book of worship, which is the United Methodist Church services that are all gathered and bound in one place. I took my book of worship, I took a hymnal, I took the Bible, and I showed up and knocked at Kevin's door. His wife answered. We sat down on the couch, and I cracked open my book of worship, and I said, "You ready to begin?" Well, not so fast. Kevin wanted to talk a little bit at first about anything, so I closed the book, and we talked a little bit more, and then I went back to the church. This meeting happened 2 or 3 times, where I would come into the church or come into his house, and I would open up the book of worship, I'd open up the Bible and the hymnal, I'd say, "Let's plan," and he'd say, "Not yet. I'm not ready yet." And then we'd talk about other things. Eventually, Kevin did die from the pancreatic cancer that was plaguing his body. I wasn't there to do the service. I imagine somebody walked with his family at some point to plan the service after his passing. But as I reflected on this story and I read these words from Psalms 42 and 43, I realized something. That Kevin's faith had kind of reached the limits. It had reached the limits of its own existence, the boundaries, the parameters of how far he was willing to go. He was willing to talk to me about how he still trusted God, and he prayed for healing and even prayed for a miracle to be healed from this stage 4 cancer diagnosis. But when we would actually come to the subject of his death in planning this service, he didn't have words. There were no words in his vocabulary for covering that subject. And I realized something, that he's not alone in that. Now, I can't imagine what it's like to face your own demise. I'm not in that position. I haven't been given that kind of grave diagnosis from the doctor. But I imagine it's really difficult. And I imagine it's natural that when you start to think about it and you have to address it, you don't have anything to say. And yet, we have these poems, these songs that we call the Book of Psalms, 150 of them, that are meant for such a time as what Kevin was facing. Walter Brueggemann, who is the late, great Hebrew Bible scholar who recently passed away, Brueggemann once called the Psalms a collection of eloquent, passionate songs and prayers of people who are at the desperate edge of their lives. I don't know how familiar you are with these 150 Psalms, but for thousands of years, they have been said by these people called the people of God. They've been lifted up in all kinds of places and times, in all kinds of circumstances, and with all kinds of emotions behind them. Up until recent day, at least. Up until the past 100 years or so, these Psalms have been the backbone, the foundation of the prayer life of the people of God. But it seems in the past 100 years, we've kind of gotten estranged from the book of Psalms. It used to be every day people would open up the Bible, where they'd have these Psalms committed to memory and would chant them, sing them, wail them together. Athanasius, who is a church father, once described the Psalms' unique place within the canon of scriptures. He said, most of the Bible speaks to us, but the Psalms are unique in that they speak for us. Have you ever thought about that? The unique place of the book of Psalms within this collection of words called the Bible, that most of the Bible is meant to be God's words to us. And yet the Psalms are human words. They're collected prayers that you are authorized to say back to God. God reveals God's own life to us as this God of love, of unending presence, of unending relationship. And yet we have this 150 songs and poems that are pretty harsh, pretty blunt, pretty unvarnished about facing the world as it really is, as we experience it. These Psalms are meant for people who are at the desperate edges of their lives. I've had more than one conversation with people in my time as a pastor where they come to worship consistently. They go to Bible study or small group. They serve in outreach. They are greeters on Sunday mornings. Then eventually they will come to me and say, I don't think I can attend church anymore. Because what we do on Sunday mornings isn't matching how I actually feel, what I'm actually going through. The songs we sing, the sermons that are given, they're not reflecting my own experience. I wonder if you've ever felt like that, if you've ever been in a similar circumstance. That's because in the past 100 years or so, I believe, our worship doesn't reflect the rich and raw experience that the Psalms actually gift us. We sing songs, we pray prayers, we gather together in our Sunday best, and we talk about how great life is, how great God is, how everything is so good. And yet on the inside, I wonder if you've ever been in a place where it feels like you're just mouthing the words, but there's no heart behind them. Worship has become hollow, shallow. As we chase authenticity and newness in experience, we leave behind things that don't feel original, things like the Psalms. And yet what we end up with is a shallowly rooted experience of God, a hollow sounding song in our souls. And the things we used to pray, practice, and participate in, they no longer fit. They no longer work. That's why the Psalms are so important to come back to time after time. These are tried and trusted words given to us as gifts for when we reach the edges of our lives. I read a book a while ago called Canoeing the Mountains. It's actually a church leadership book. I don't recommend you read it. But the overarching analogy is about Lewis and Clark. When they were making their westward journey toward the Pacific Ocean, they were looking for a waterway, a northwest passage to take them from the East Coast all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And they get to what is now known as the Rocky Mountains, and they write about how they thought they were just going to crest a hill, and then they come over that hill and they'd see a river leading down to the ocean. And instead what they found as they crested a hill and continued to climb is they saw these jagged, imposing, snow-capped mountains. And dragging their canoes behind them, they had to let them go. And instead of being people who rafted on the rivers, they had to become mountain climbers. They came to the edges of what they knew, and they were not prepared for what lied ahead, and they had to adjust and pivot. And the analogy is that we often prepare for what we have known in the past, and then what we find in the future is something completely different. We have to adapt as well if we're going to be people who follow Jesus. And I think the Psalms are what lead us when we're journeying off the map. They accompany us when the words we used to say and the songs we used to sing don't match what we're actually experiencing in our lives. So today, we come to Psalm 42 and Psalm 43. And you immediately hear about the psalmist, the speaker, who's longing for an experience of God. Did you hear in the first few verses about the dryness, the parched thirst that the psalmist is experiencing in his own life? Well, we all know something about that living in South Texas, the physical experiences of a land in drought. But I wonder if you've ever felt that way spiritually. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God, the psalmist proclaims. living God. Have you heard of the phrase living water before? That appears in the Hebrew Bible over and over. Living water, Ma'im Hayim is the Hebrew phrase. This is water that doesn't collect and sit still. It's water that's been flowing, either from snow-capped peaks of mountains or maybe from rivers or rain itself. This is water that doesn't stay still, that is fresh. Well, the psalmist here is using that image of living water and is now saying, I want an experience of the living God, not a stagnant experience of God that collects mosquitoes and becomes gross. I want a God that is moving and dynamic, something new, something fresh, because what is happening in life isn't working anymore. I wonder if you've ever gone through something where the faith that you were handed doesn't fit what life is handing you right now. Maybe it's something external, right? Something that happened with a relationship, a job, a reversal of income and fortune, whatever it is. Maybe it's an internal feeling, right? Some new revelation or the questions that are nagging you. Whatever it is, we come to a crossroads in our lives and we realize if we keep going down the same path we've always been going down, it's not going to lead anywhere life-giving. We have to go somewhere different. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God, a new experience. If you read the Hebrew scriptures, what you'll find is that people are always on a journey. From the very beginning, they're on the move. There's no such thing as staying in the same place. There's no such thing as keeping life as it always is, one day after the next. Faith, life with God, is dynamic. It's ever-changing, which means we have to be flexible and open and adaptable. And what the Psalms are saying is that we will hit points in our lives where it feels like we've come to the end of the road, that we're going to fall off the edge, and we don't know how to take the plunge. The Psalms are uncomfortable for us as Christians, aren't they? Their language, it's raw. It doesn't match the prayers we pray here in corporate worship. It doesn't sound like the songs we sing where we give God praise and glory. Did you hear the words in Psalms 42 and 43? It says, grant me justice, O God, for why should you forget me? Has anyone ever talked to God like this out loud in front of other people? If we're brave, we'll do it in our prayer closet by ourselves silently, right? But these are the prayers that we are gifted as a people to say together when we don't have the words to pray any longer. Psalms make us brave. They carry us courageously. When it feels like our faith is weak or non-existent, they give us permission to speak what we're really feeling. Or they give us a structure when we don't have any feeling at all. One of the gifts of being collected together as a community is that when you feel like you show up and it's all you can do just to be here, and you don't even have the energy or life itself to sing the songs or pray the prayers, you look to your sisters and brothers who will carry you with their own words. So one of the things I often run into with the Psalms is when people say, I don't really feel the way these Psalms are speaking. I don't feel vengeance. I don't feel desperation. My life is really good right now. One of the invitations is to pray these prayers on behalf of other people. Because there's someone somewhere, either in this room, on live stream, or somewhere in the world, who's feeling the kind of desperation and dead end that these Psalms are describing. And one of our commitments as a community is to pray together for and with each other. So whether you're feeling this way or not, you can pray these prayers, but you're especially invited to pray them when these feelings do match your own experience in real life. They're bold. They hold God to account. They take God to task, saying, God, you promised to be my God. Do something. How can you forget me? The boldness of the Psalms is not to be spiritualized or disregarded. This is real human experience we're talking. And so often the shallow forms of faith don't give credit to what you're actually feeling or thinking as a real person. But the Psalms do. They say those feelings belong here. And the God who made you and who sustains you is big enough to embrace those feelings that you are feeling. You can offer them to God without worrying what God's going to think or do in response. God's big enough. Not only are the Psalms honest, but they're also ways they open doors for us to new experiences that we might not have had unless we've gone through this period of suffering or doubt or feeling lost. These words make possible new experiences of faith. As we say them time and time again, what we find is that the door opens ever so slightly, becomes more and more accessible, so that when you feel like you're dried out and parched and about to lose everything, these Psalms come as refreshment. And not only that, they're that scaffolding that holds up the structure when it's about to crumble. And after a while, what you find is that praying these Psalms time and time again, it comes back to you. This experience of God comes back to you, albeit differently than it was before the crisis, before the moment of pain and doubt, before the struggle. Faith does come back, but it's different than before. Life looks different, and God appears differently because of that. It's the same God, but we have a new experience of this God. And it's because we struggle. It's because we wrestle. It's because we ask the question and feel the feelings. It's because we are honest before God that we can encounter and unlock this new experience and become different people. We talk about how the Psalms are our words to God, but what we find incredibly is that Jesus also prayed the Psalms. You know the line, my God, why have you forsaken me? You know that that's Psalm 22 that Jesus is praying as he's on the cross. Jesus prayed these prayers religiously every single day. He would have had these 150 poems and songs committed to memory. And so what we find in a mysterious way is that these very human, raw, unvarnished words have become the words of God as well. That when Jesus prays them, they are filled and breathed in with new life. God prays these prayers with us. So when we open our mouths and speak the words, whether in joy or in sorrow, agony or anger, wherever we find ourselves, we can be comforted knowing that God prayed them too and still prays them with us. I once met with a church member who came to me and had the same conversation about how church isn't working for them anymore. And they said, you know, what I've experienced, what I've gone through, I feel like I've outgrown church. It doesn't work anymore. I can't be here. I feel like I've evolved beyond faith. I don't know what I said to that person, but now I wish I would have said these words. You haven't grown out of faith. What you've actually done is fallen right into the lap of faith. When you feel like you've wandered off the map, when you feel like what's in front of you is not lazy streams but foreboding mountains, the Psalms become a guide, a companion. They become the netting that catches us and holds us and keeps our feet firm one step at a time. That's where we fall straight into real faith, genuine faith, a faith that Jesus himself has.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Weekly Teaching. To watch the full live stream of this worship service, you can view all archived streams at the Alamo Heights UMC YouTube channel. If you have any questions, email us at podcasts@ahumc.org. That's podcasts@ahumc.org. You can also visit our website, ahumc.org, anytime. Any related links are also in this episode's show notes. Again, thank you so much for being a listener. We truly appreciate your time